What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 1 of Bleav in Queens. I'm Joe Serralo. You might know me already from Serralo Sports Talk. Joining me, the New York Mets diehard guru himself, my man, my co-host, Tyler Ward, WardyNYM. Tyler, what's up, man?
How's it going? I'm so pumped up. This has been, long overdue. I know I had you on my channel like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, kind of introduce you to my viewers here on YouTube. And I know that if you're not watching the video format, you might not know who I am, especially for wherever you get your podcast. But again, my name's Tyler. I'm a YouTuber, content creator. Been doing this for a year and a half now. I cover all things regarding the New York Mets. I'm a young diehard fan, like I know many of you guys listening right now. And I'm just absolutely pumped up to start off this podcast with you, Joe. When Bleav first reached out, I was like, oh, this seems like a match made in heaven. So I'm just really antsy. I'm excited to get into it. And Joe, really pivoting back to you quick, for people that don't know who you are, expand a little bit further on what made you a Mets fan and what has led you to this point now in which we're having this discussion.
Yeah, well, some of you might know, if you've already followed my show, Serralo Sports Talk, that I cover everything from the NFL to the NBA to baseball. But baseball has always been my first love. And so, when I, a full-time, staffer here at Bleav in the talent department, was tasked with staffing a New York Mets show at the company, it was a no-brainer that I was going to be a part of it in addition to staffing it. And so grew up a diehard Mets fan. I would say across any sport, any team, they've always been my favorite team. Grew up going to, Shea, and it was like a treat that would happen 2-3 times a year. Got to the point where both my dad and I were working at Citi Field for the Mets, and it just became more than a favorite team. The Mets organization, the people at the ballpark, season ticket holders, regulars, employees, it just became a family for me. So I worked for the Mets for 4 years. I'm a baseball player my whole life, played through the college ranks, and really excited to get this show going and talk about the team that I'm most passionate about. It's really fun to be able to talk on national radio every week, Tyler, about, the biggest stories and the hot button pressing topics. But there's nothing like talking about your favorite team to an audience who's equally as passionate about that organization as you are. And that's why this show is just going to be a blast.
Yeah, beautifully said. Because for me, at least, I grew up a diehard sports fan. Mets have always been my favorite baseball team. And especially because I'm originally from Long Island, but I reside in Pennsylvania, have for the majority of my life. And growing up, I have Philly fans around me, Yankees fans. I really don't have many Mets fans. And because of that reason, I figure, I have a lot of passionate thoughts and really feel that I could really express myself well here on the internet. Let's start a YouTube channel. Let's get that rolling. And that now has led in a year and a half's time to being the largest Mets content type platform on YouTube, not directly affiliated with the Mets or SNY, and only, again, a year and a half span. So it's been a whirlwind. I cannot believe I'm even in this position right now, because not to just have this opportunity with Bleav with you, Joe, but knowing that soon, probably a couple episodes in, we are going to be having a third co-host that is, in fact, going to be, yes, a former New York Met. So, Joe, what was your reaction just to find out that news initially, and how pumped up are you to, again, get rolling and knowing that this is going to be something that is going to be a whirlwind in this Mets season, in which the Mets right now are kind of one of the best teams in baseball?
Well, I would say my reaction to that's twofold. Look, I'm excited as hell. I can't wait to get a former Met on the show with us talking about the team. But it's also stressful because at Bleav, I'm the one tasked with the assignment of finding that former Met to join us every week. So I can't wait to bring that to all of you. It's going to be fun. Look, there's been no shortage from the 60s all the way to present day of big personalities in that clubhouse in Flushing. So when the time is right, we can't wait to introduce that third co-host. We know you're going to be excited when you all find out who he is. But I do want to remind everyone that today's show and every show of Bleav in Queens is brought to you by our proud sponsors at BetOnline. That's betonline.ag. Head on over there. Use the promo code Bleav for your 50% welcome bonus. They've got you covered for the Stanley Cup Finals, for every baseball game from now until early November. They've got NFL futures, NBA draft bets. Don't forget, the draft is just hours away. So head over to BetOnline. Use that promo code Bleav, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus, and let the games begin.
Awesome. Okay, Joe, I don't really think we need to say too much more right now. We could easily go on an hour plus just describing what has led us to this point. But I know for the viewers here on YouTube, on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, Bleavs, and wherever you get your podcast for the audio format, they want to hear talking about the New York Mets, right? So let's just start by deep diving the Mets and looking at how they've done so far this year, right? As things stand currently, we're recording this right after the Mets lost that 2-game set in Houston, which was by all means frustrating. You guys don't know, I do post-game coverage of live shows after every single Mets game throughout the year. I share my raw thoughts then. I feel like I've calmed down a bit now, and I've rationalized that, yes, this was a 2-game set, 2 games in 21 hours, and without Jeff McNeil in the lineup and Cookie Carrasco exiting, that is a big factor in today's discussion, along with who is potentially going to be replacing him, or at minimum is going to be returning the rotation, that being, and yes, Mad Max Scherzer, that we'll be getting into soon. I know that after this series for the Mets, while it wasn't pretty, we still have plenty positives to take away on this season, as they are just under 20 games above 500, 45-26 to be exact. And really, when looking a little bit further at this series against the Astros, however, Joe, what were the biggest standout for you? Because for me personally, other than the fact that the Mets did not have an off day, flew to Houston. Again, it would have been nice if they had an off day today at the time that you guys are watching this, for a break between those two series, Miami and then Houston. But there were plenty of factors into why you would expect maybe the Mets to not get off on the right foot in that matchup. But there were still some things, even with McNeil out of the lineup, that I personally would have liked to see more. And I fully expect the Mets to bounce back and have a better performance when they match up against Houston next week at Citi Field.
Yeah, look, here's my thing, man. I was going into this series hoping for a split, right? And this may be the first series all year that I've had that approach or that mentality going into it with. I wasn't expecting the Mets to go in there and sweep 2 games in 21 hours, like you mentioned. They pretty much finished up a 7-game homestand, got right on a plane to play those 2 games in less than 24 hours. And this series was just, it was a weird, funky midweek deal that, was set up for failure. And essentially, you had 2 bullpen games. Neither starter got into the 5th inning, Trevor Williams or Cookie Carrasco. And for me, look, I'm an optimist. I feel like if you're a Mets fan, you need to be. Otherwise, you'll see yourself slowly go absolutely batshit crazy. So I try to stay optimistic. And when I look at how the bullpen performed in these 2 games, I'm thrilled with that, because everyone, with the exception of Chase and Shreve, the bullpen was nearly flawless these 2 games in Houston. So for me, that's the biggest takeaway. Now, when you look at Shreve, unfortunately, it's tough to find really good situational lefty relievers. Obviously, we were spoiled last year with Aaron Loop, but even when you look at him this year with the Angels, he's got an ERA of about 4.5. So with Shreve, it's kind of a necessity to have the lefty out there, but his days might be numbered in Queens, because he just can't get anyone out, lefty or righty. So with the exception of him, I thought looking at this series, you had the unfortunate, surprising injury to Cookie Carrasco. He didn't make it out of the 3rd. Trevor Williams, really as good as he's been for the most part for the Mets, never goes past 5. So I thought the bullpen in these circumstances was a real big bright spot to look at.
I'm glad that you brought up a bright spot for the bullpen, because normally when looking at the Mets bullpen, it's so easy to nitpick, because that has far and away in a lot of ways this season been the biggest gripe for them. When they've had one of the top offenses in all baseball consistently for the most part this season, even though that June has been a little up and down, directly in part with their injuries that we saw on the West Coast trip, especially. The bullpen, however, you've seen a little bit of ups and downs, shakiness, but outside of Chase and Shreve, who I will say is on a short leash, I will be very surprised if Chase and Shreve is honestly in the bullpen for the remainder of the season. He's a guy that himself and Joely Rodriguez, they haven't been consistent as those lone southpaws in the pen. But Shreve, again, this guy is simply getting shelled, and especially any time in which a pitcher is, say, exiting when there's a couple guys on, forget it. And even with him coming in that, I didn't love the move by Buck personally. I understood a lefty on lefty situation against the Astros in game 1. But when you can't even get lefties out when you're supposed to be a lefty specialist, that is a massive red flag for me. So Shreve, I do think he's on the short end of the stick. Like, I think he has a short leash. But Adonis Medina going 3 strong yesterday to eat those innings for the bullpen. Right then today, Yon Lopez, after Carrasco exits, over 2 scoreless. And then also Tommy Hunter, who just came back in the Mets bullpen out of nowhere. If you guys don't know, Hunter was with the Mets in the bullpen last year, was traded right around the trade deadline to the Tampa Bay Rays, was injured, didn't play another game in the season after he has first base knock of his career in Atlanta. If you know, you know. But Hunter pitches 1.1 scoreless too. Like, guys that are not supposed to be regulars by any stretch in this Mets bullpen are eating innings. And this is something that I personally emphasize all the time, especially in my post-game shows, because yeah, it sucks talking about the Mets after a loss, especially a series loss, but let's look at things that we can appreciate, and especially when you can get relievers, guys that who knows how much of a leash that they will have in the pen this year to begin with, eat 2, 3+ innings with ease against an Astros team that's among the best in baseball. I mean, that's nothing short of impressive. So huge tip of the cap. If there's one positive to take away from that 2-game set, it is, in fact, those relievers.
Yeah, and don't forget also the fact that this team is never going to stop fighting, right? Carrasco had an awful first inning today, and it could have been easy to pack this one in. You just lost 8-2 last night. Carrasco goes out there, gives up, 3 first-inning home runs. You find yourselves in a 4-0 hole. Could have been really easy on a getaway day to just disengage, but they fought back. Obviously didn't get the result we wanted, but only losing 5-3, scoring 3 unanswered later on in the game. The team fought back. They were in it, and that's kind of been the story of this team all year. It doesn't matter if they're down 7-0 to the Phillies in the ninth, or 7-1 in the ninth rather, 2-0 to the Cardinals in the ninth inning. This team's not out until that 27th out has been made. So they showed that same fight against Houston, and I'm excited to get to Miami and go win some division games.
I'm excited for that too. And before we get there, because we have a lot to say on the Miami series, again, Houston, especially with this being our first official episode of the pod, there aren't many positives to take away from that one. So it's easy to say, push it aside a little bit. And I think we'll have a better idea on how the Mets match up with a team like the Astros. Not that it means so much outside of potentially a World Series type matchup in either this year or the years going forward, but knowing that, again, the Mets do match up against Houston at Citi Field next week. So that is going to be the bigger test with a healthier Mets lineup than what we saw here. But one more thing that I do want to add about the Mets faltering here was the offense was absolutely anemic in game one we saw, right? That was, in my opinion, probably the worst game the Mets have had this year, one of from an offensive standpoint. And that has been a trend this month when looking at how they've lost. They've lost in blowout fashion, either not having pitching but not having offense. But it still has been really hard to truly gauge those factors when in almost every single one of those games, the Mets have either been losing one key player out of the lineup due to injury, either entering that game or got hurt in that game, or two, already had someone out to begin with, say, in the rotation. So there's a lot of reasons to justify behind why the Mets did not play well. Again, I'm not going to give every excuse in the book. I still want them to perform better. But in game two, yes, I was impressed with the Mets. This felt like a game early on that's like, oh no, Cookie Carrasco's his 2021 self here in the first inning. The Mets, they're going to get shelled, and they're not going to bounce back at all. So the fact that they had a valiant effort there, got a couple runs scored, even though that I was by all means frustrated when they had bases juiced in the sixth with less than 2 outs, and they couldn't even get those guys in. Back-to-back games, the Mets had bases low, less than 2 outs, and you had guys like Eduardo Escobar, they're striking out or popping up, who, in my opinion, has really been a struggle for the Mets this year. I want to see that man succeed. He's the best personality, and he owned up to it in postgame today, saying that he hopes and fully expects to give Mets fans something to cheer about soon. Literally wish him nothing but the best, but he has been one of those glaring spots currently in the Mets lineup. And then outside of that, J.D. Davis swinging right through fastballs per usual. I mean, it's a broken record with the guys that have been inconsistent this season. And that's something that I hope that we see more productivity of going forward, especially entering this Marlins matchup that by all means you can rightfully argue is more important than these games against Houston. Because I'm not sure if you're aware, Joe, but the team that wins the most games against their rivals in the NL East has won the division the past 9 years. So basically, if the Mets, if they win more than anyone else, they're locked in to win the division. The Braves do it, they're going to win. So these games, even against the Marlins, even with them being one of the worst teams right now in the NL East, are awfully important, especially now earlier in the year, again, when the Mets still have plenty of difficulty on their schedule down the stretch, especially in the month of June.
Well, that's a great stat, Tyler. I actually didn't know that one. And you look at the past 9 years, I mean, I'd say right now the Mets are off to a pretty good start in that department. We're beating up on the Nationals this season. We're 9-3 against Philly in 12 games. And now you look at the Marlins and, yes, the Marlins are probably not going to contend with the Mets, Braves, and Phillies atop the division. But the Marlins are not a pushover. I mean, they have one of the best pitchers in baseball in Sandy Alcantara. And it's going to be really interesting because the Mets are a team that has not lost 3 games in a row yet this season. They've lost 2 games in a row now for the 4th time this year, but they have not lost 3 straight. And this is going to be one of their toughest tests because their next game is going up against Sandy Alcantara and the Marlins. Of course, Alcantara pitched the 1 game last weekend in that 4-game set where the Mets lost. But at the same time, while Alcantara's been one of the best in baseball all year, Taijuan Walker has been one of the hottest pitchers in baseball right now. And it's going to be Walker versus Alcantara. I can't wait for this matchup. I mentioned earlier in the show, I'm a former pitcher myself. And so, getting to watch these two guys a little bit on Alcantara. I mean, what I love about him is that he's a 1970s, 1980s bulldog out there, right? The guy does not want to come out to the game. Doesn't matter if he's got, 100 pitches or 120. He wants to start a game. He wants to finish a game. And there are not too many guys like that in the MLB or in baseball in general anymore. So Alcantara is a rare breed, and, his success has paid off this year. He could have left that Mets-Marlins game on Sunday on Father's Day down 1-0 in the 6th. he stayed in there. The Marlins bats finally woke up, and he put the finishing touches on it. I think he went 8 innings in that game on Sunday. Taijuan Walker, on the other hand, 19 strikeouts in his last 2. This is a guy who really, since maybe his rookie sophomore season, this guy has not been a power pitcher, a strikeout pitcher. We're seeing his velocity reach new heights. I was at his start on Sunday Night Baseball out in Anaheim when the Mets played the Angels. And I mean, he was touching 97 consistently. So Walker's velocity is up. His splitter is moving at rates that it hasn't yet, at least not in his year and a half as a Met. So, don't forget, the guy was an all-star last year. He's making a late push to be an all-star again, consecutive years as a New York Met. That's going to be a great pitching duel to start off this series.
Yeah, game one both has me excited and terrified all at the same time, right? As a baseball fan, I absolutely love and appreciate Sandy Alcantara and what he's done. Against my Mets, of course, not so much. So if you look at how the Mets fared against Alcantara in their last matchup, which was just literally a couple days ago, Alcantara won 8 innings, gave up 2 earned with 6 hits, and had himself 7 to 8 strikeouts. I mean, he's been absolutely nasty this year. Looking at his actual stat line at this point, he's 7-2 with a 1.72 ERA. Right now, you could rightfully argue that Alcantara is among not just the elite in baseball, but looking like a heavy favorite early on to win the NL Cy Young. That's how good this guy has been, not just with the crazy velo, but he's had the Mets number for literally quite some time. If you look at his career totals against the Mets, he's almost literally a strikeout per inning. Like, that's how good he's been. He's just been absolutely nasty. And Ty, where have these strikeouts come from? Well, the slider is a big factor as well. If you look at his usage and his last start against Miami, he threw the slider more than every other pitch. And you're like, where's this coming from with Taijuan Walker? I mean, he had the splitter going all throughout the year. The fastball, we know that thing I have seen, especially in his Jekyll and Hyde 2021 year, sometimes it looks like a meatball out there. And you got to be a little wary when you have a guy that maybe doesn't have as much movement or life as you want on the heater. But over his past couple starts, he has been the complete opposite. He has more life. He has more average velo there that he has with the fastball. And then the slider, the splitter, that entire mix. I mean, give credit where credit's due, not just to Ty, but also to, of course, Hefner, the Mets pitching coach, who does a phenomenal job with the staff. And I am pumped up. This very well could be the biggest game of this series. And as we pivot now from game one pitching matchup to game two, we have another exciting one. And again, on paper, yes, I know that the Mets did work, that being in Rogers, the young southpaw, in their last start. The Mets were able to get four runs total, 3 earned in 5 innings, including 5 hits, 7 strikeouts. The Mets have been striking out a lot here in June for the most part, especially early on. Rogers, I mean, literally fastballs right down the pipe, and everyone and your mother was swinging right through them. I don't know why. Righties on lefties, especially, the Mets have not done great against when you think that they would. But no less, you have Rogers, who's 3-6 with a sub-6 ERA. I expect him to bounce back and have a better second half. I mean, outside of him when he had his injury last year, lead up to the All-Star break, he was one of the better pitchers in all the NL. So I'm not sleeping on Rogers regardless. But the Mets have Chris Bassitt, and Bassitt, who had a phenomenal start that you saw just a couple days ago against Miami, that unfortunately, in my opinion, I want to know if you agree or disagree with this one on Joe, I thought that Bassitt should not have stayed in there in the 7th. He was already at 100 pitches, looking strong through 6. And then you saw Buck throw him out there for 1 more, directly in hand because Alcantara was dealing and he was going at minimum 8. So I understood that thought process. But, Bassitt, he gets the bases juiced with less than 2 outs. And then the Mets, unfortunately, the bullpen not able to do anything but surrender runs. Seth Lugo gives up a grand salami to a rookie at his MLB debut that day. Reminded me of Isan Diaz, if you remember him, when he hit his home run in his first game of his career against Jacob deGrom at Citi Field. But Bassitt's 5-5 with a 4.03 ERA. Again, 3 earned, 5 hits, 6.1 innings last time he faced Miami a couple of days ago. So what are you looking for in this matchup, Joe? And especially, what's your take on Buck's utilization of going maybe, in my opinion, 1 more inning than maybe he should have there with Bassitt?
Well, look, I mean, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, right, man? When it comes to Chris Bassitt, he's been a really interesting case this year. As far as performance at home, he's been way better at home at Citi Field than he has been on the road. He threw 6 scoreless to start off the game on Father's Day. Admittedly, I didn't watch the game. Father's Day was also my birthday. I was busy jumping out of airplanes over the Pacific Ocean to celebrate instead of watching. You have
priorities to deal with. I don't blame you.
Yeah, skydiving on my birthday or watching, every Met game. As it is, I probably watch 130 a year. But so I didn't watch Bassitt in this start, but in his last one to start off the homestand against Milwaukee, the guy looked phenomenal. So he was coming off a great start. He's been better at home. I understand Buck leaving him in there, especially when the bullpen has been a bit shaky this year. So, again, easy to look back at it and say it was the wrong move. Was it? Yeah, probably. But, it is what it is. We still took 3 out of 4 in the series. As far as Rodgers, I might be a little less, or, who am I kidding? I'm a lot less bullish on Rodgers than you are. I mean, I think to me, it's like Friday is the tough game, with Alcantara coming in. You got to beat the best to be the best. So Friday is the game that I have circled. And then after that, it's like I'm expecting to win Saturday. Bassitt, to me, it's like you got to rebound. And I think, Bassitt's got a bit of that. Maybe it's hanging around Scherzer this year. He's got a bit of that pit bull mentality. He's got a big edge to him. And I think, he's not thinking about those 6 great innings he tossed, right? He's thinking about not getting out of the 7th. So I think he's going to pitch a little pissed off. And, his stuff is just far superior to Rodgers. He's one of the rare guys that has 6 pitches that he can use in almost every count, every situation. So I think Bassitt's actually going to come out Saturday with a really good start. And then, Sunday, I mean, should we get into it, man? What we're expecting Sunday? A little Thursday action?
Yes,
First
let's
time
get
in a
into
few
it.
weeks?
Exactly. Thursday, indeed. That is the highlight, especially if you're watching this on YouTube. I haven't emphasized that we're talking about Mad Max because, look, at the time of recording this, nothing is official as of now. Max just pitched his rehab start last night for the Rumble Ponies. Max went 3 innings, gave up 2 runs. One guy hit a bomb off of him. I don't know who that was for the fight in Phils, but he needs to get called up ASAP for doing that off of Max. This man, prior to the game start, is looking like he's preparing for, Game 7 of the World Series. That's the reason why. Oh my!
Did you see that?
Yes, he's literally. I'm not surprised. I would have been surprised if he was, acting how he is when he's not starting. That's why Mad Max again is one of the best that we have ever seen in our lifetime. He is a bona fide sure Hall of Famer as soon as he retires, and I cannot wait to see him back because while nothing's official right now, health-wise, Buck said that he's going to just talk with Max and see how he's feeling. Max said post-game after his Rumble Pony start, he's like, 1, I never want to be a Rumble Pony again. I'm not supposed to be here. And 2, I want to be with the Team Array. I'm itching. I feel great. I'm healthy. So if we're basing things off of Scherzer's decision, I'm pretty confident saying that, yes, Max will be back this Sunday in Miami for the series finale against these Miami Marlins. And especially with the unknown status right now of Cookie Carrasco. Now, hopefully for Cookie's case, again, it's lower back tightness, which that's what was reported today. It's great that's not inflammation with his shoulder, with his, mechanics, his elbow, arm in general. But should Cookie, at worst case scenario, either have an IL stint or just skip a start, it just means it's that much more important for the rest of the rotation to pick off where Cookie has been, for the most part, a really strong starter for the Mets this year. And Max, I mean, if Max returns, which he's fully expected to right now, how can you not be ecstatic? He's been out for a month. He's 2 weeks ahead of schedules, between 6 and 8 weeks, so he got there on the earliest mark possible. Obliques aren't an easy thing to come back from and handle with ease. But again, Mad Max is an anomaly of a pitcher, just like soon to be another Mets starter over the next month back in this rotation, Jacob deGrom. But we'll discuss him in further episodes.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to Max and that AA rehab start. I mean, I saw that video on Twitter. I'm sure you saw the same thing. And, the way he's just in the dugout, head down, legs shaking, because Max is always shaking or moving some body part. And he's just like so locked in, like it's Game 7. I was waiting for Lose Yourself to start, coming in like background music. I mean, this guy is more intense than anyone I've ever watched play baseball. I mean, look, I mean, we talked about Alcantara and how he's cut from that, 1960s, 1970s cloth. Scherzer's one of the other guys who he doesn't ever want to come out of a game. Now, obviously, he's, it's later on in his career. He's a bit older, had the dead arm last year. You've got to monitor him a little bit at 37, 38 years old. But Scherzer, every time he goes out there, he does not want to come out. And I think the perfect player-manager combination in baseball, there are no 2 guys, I think, who are on the same wavelength more than Buck Showalter and Max Scherzer. And that's why I'm so glad that this year the Mets finally got away from that rinky-dink sideshow, Mickey Callaway, Louis Rojas, these guys who, the players respond nice to them. Well, they're younger. They get the players more. They're analytic drip. No, Buck Showalter's a baseball guy. Max Scherzer's a baseball guy. There's no doubt that Buck being the manager played a big reason in Max coming to Queens, signing with the Mets, because they're baseball guys. They get each other. You look at them in the dugout on Max's days off, and it's Buck and it's Max. I mean, he's almost like an assistant coach on this team. So, Scherzer, like you said, it's not official that he's going to start Sunday, but if he says he's ready to go, then he's going to go. And he's, he may be the one guy on this team that Buck won't get into it with, because Scherzer knows baseball, I think, just as well as Buck, and he wants to win just as badly as Buck. So I can't wait to have him out there. I mean, this is a guy who has terrorized the Marlins throughout his career. I mean, I got it up right now. We're looking at, 26 starts against the Marlins, 168 innings, 189 strikeouts, and he's 15-5 with a sub-3 ERA. I mean, the guy has destroyed the Marlins, especially during his tenure with the Nationals, of course. And I think that, if you're tied 1-1 or up 2-0, Scherzer coming back on Sunday is going to be a good day for the Mets.
And here's the thing, even with them being in Miami, you can still make the rightful argument that now is a good time for Max as long as he's ready to go, right? Having that rest, of course, but to facing a Miami team that on paper right now has definitely had their struggles offensively this year. Now in June, they picked things up a little bit, and we saw they had some life there in the one game in which the Mets lost, but that was really more Alcantara than it was the offense for Miami. But that is a matchup that I think is a perfect way for Max to get himself immersed back in this rotation versus even say him starting right away against the Astros, right? I mean, just for different reasons based on, not that Max can't handle the Astros, but I'm saying it's a good matchup. Everything on paper makes you believe that, yes, this is exactly the type of team that Max should start out against and then build up on that from there. And Scherzer this year, he's been nothing short of absolute money. And the funniest part was up until, his injury, you could rightfully say that he wasn't even the best starter in this rotation because of how much the Mets were rolling with their depth this year. No less, Max has been an absolute stud per usual. When looking at his numbers, he's 5-1 this year. He's basically a guaranteed win, which I know that wins and losses for records don't mean too much. We know that very well with Jacob deGrom and his back-to-back Cy Youngs, but still,
this team's
it's
different,
something. Man. It's different, especially when these wins are factors heavily for the Mets' success right now. And a 2.54 ERA, I mean, just an absolute stud. And nothing's confirmed on who he would potentially be facing. I just did quick math. It might be Castano, who's a young southpaw who is pitching for Miami. Right now on the year, Castano is 0-1 with a 2.57 ERA. So again, he's been a guy that has been in the rotation all year long for Miami. It's been in part with the injuries that they've dealt with. Miami's been very interesting with how they've shuffled their starters so far this year, healthy or not. So it's going to be an interesting pitching matchup. All I know is that Max is expected and will be on the bump there for the Sunday series finale. I expect a W. Anything less, in my opinion, will be nothing short of an insult.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think Max is the kind of guy who they're going to have to ease on in, ease on back. I think Max is back and he's going to throw at least 6, going to throw at least, his version of easing back in or gearing back up will be like 90 pitches as opposed to 105, right? That's what you're dealing with when you have a pit bull like Max Scherzer out there. Plus, what better spot to come back than Miami? This is a borderline anemic offense. It's a big pitcher's ballpark. And when you look at the weather, right, this guy is dealing with an oblique injury. Well, that's an injury caused by tightness, right? What better climate to pitch in than, South Beach, right? I mean, even if the roof is on and the AC is on and it's climate controlled, it's still in the 70s. If the roof's open, it's hot. I mean, I don't know. For me, when I was a pitcher, hotter the better, right? I mean, you're looser, you're ready to go. To me, and especially being that I went to school up in St. Bonaventure, up in, the frigid cold in the shadow of Buffalo, it was the 30-degree games that killed my arm. But when we got a rare 70, 80-degree game, I could throw all day. And so for Scherzer coming back from an injury caused by tightness, I mean, this is the climate you want to pitch in, right? Obviously, April in Queens is not ideal, but, June in Miami, whether the roof's open or closed, this is the kind of game you want Max going in.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought up your experience as a pitcher as well, because that's a great point that, especially early on in the year, talking about another guy that is trying to make his way back from injury is Trevor May, who's progressing really well. But as you probably remember, leading up until his injury for the Mets this year, he wasn't healthy right from the jump. And he said openly that, yeah, it usually takes me the first month to really get adjusted again because he's a guy that spent the entirety of his career in Minnesota, now at Citi Field with the Mets. I mean, it's still going to be cold there to begin the season, no doubt. That has had a huge impact on how he's able to begin his year, let alone just pitch overall based on these climates. So that's definitely another reason to say that, yeah, Max is destined against Miami, and hopefully he's going to have a strong start in his first game back in quite literally a month. The last time that Max Scherzer was on the bump for the Mets was May 18th. So it's been a hot minute now, but already it feels like it's happening in the snap of a finger. And I cannot wait to see him return. So talking a little bit further about the Mets rotation right now, Joe, I want to know what your opinions are on really, do you think that this is enough for them? And do you believe, the way that I do at least, that moves feel inevitable? It's just a matter of when versus, if, because you have Cookie again with his back tightness. Again, by the time this video comes out there, we already may have further information on his status, on if he's on the IL, or if it's just a day-to-day thing, or if he doesn't even miss a start, that he's okay. Regardless, though, when you look at the Mets with Tyler McGill not coming back until at earliest late August, early September. When you look at Jacob deGrom, who is still now one sim game, one live batters faced away this upcoming weekend, and then he's starting an extended rehab stint for upwards of 3 to 5 starts. So he's still a month plus away from the Mets is what we're looking like at the moment. When you look at these uncertainties right now with the health status of the rotation, how do you expect the Mets to handle it in the weeks to month plus going forward?
I mean, I think Steve Cohen's going to do whatever he has to do to put this team in the best position to, not just win the division, but run away with the division and retain that 1 seed in the National League, right? I no longer think this is about just trying to make the playoffs after a really disappointing second half collapse a year ago. This is about getting the 1 seed. It's about, running the table. It's about winning a championship. So whatever Steve's got to do, whatever he's got to pay luxury tax wise, it's going to be done. It's going to be paid right now. I mean, obviously it's tough. Starting pitching is necessary at the moment. On July 31st, it might not be as necessary. To me, the bullpen is a more pressing need. I mentioned Chase and Shreve's days might be numbered. I need a lefty reliever. I need a starter who can play, a kind of a flex role, who's probably going to be a reliever come October. If we add a starter, maybe we move David Peterson to the bullpen. He hasn't really gone that deep into games. I think he's got a couple 6-inning starts, but normally a 4 to 5 inning guy. And I'm sure that if he's in the pen in a 1 to 2 inning role, he'll be pumping 96, 97 if he's throwing less pitches, So maybe that's how we solve our lefty issues. We add a starter and slide Peterson to the pen. Maybe we just add a starter and add a reliever. But, to me, the answer is pitching. I think our offense is fine. I know that you had some qualms with how J.D. Davis has been hitting, and I completely get it. But at the end of the day, top to bottom, we have one of the best lineups in baseball. So, I'm not worried about our offense. It's just pitching. Even when our pitching is fantastic, you just can't have enough.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. Look, when addressing quickly on the Mets offense, that's something that I don't think will be a detriment to their success this year. It has been the biggest factor in their success, as a matter of fact, right? But as we get closer to the deadline, funny enough, I'll actually probably have a video out later today talking about potential fits bat-wise for the Mets by the deadline. But what I do know is that this is something where it's really more so of a luxury to just take that next step with what they already have built versus a need. We all know that the need is 1000% the likes of starting pitching and bullpen, right? To what degree are the Mets going to be able to go out and say land a big name starter? Are they going to pony up the dough prospect wise and Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas, or if a scenario where everyone's healthy, are they going to go more down the route of a Trevor Williams 2.0, potentially another long reliever guy that can eat innings for them and get creative and just give the Mets further MLB caliber depth and not have to be reliant in a worst case scenario of say 1 or 2 starters drop down the stretch this year after the trade deadline that you have to go to, last year's version of Jared Eichhoff's, like you can't have those things again in this rotation. So it's pivotal that no matter what you add depth. I fully expect the Mets to. And again, it's not the matter of if it's going to happen, but a matter of when. So with that being said, Joe, I think we hit the nail on the head, everything for this episode. The last thing that I think that you want to mention quickly was on the Mets and their all-star stats right now. So take it away.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, we've got that new all-star voting format this year. We're a week away from the, quote unquote runoff vote, where this year for all infield positions, the top 2 vote getters starting on June 30th will go to a runoff where it's just the top 2. For outfield positions, it'll be the top 6 vote getters. And the Mets have a lot of guys in the mix. You've got Pete Alonso, second for National League first baseman. Of course, Paul Goldschmidt's got a sizable lead, but that lead means nothing come June 30th. It's just the top 2 guys. So you've got Alonso second. You've got Jeff McNeil third, but he's only about 9,000 votes. By now, it may even be less. That's a number I saw a couple days ago, behind Ozzie Albies. And Albies is probably out for the remainder of the season. So you've got McNeil could very easily in the next week work his way into the number 2 spot where he would go to a runoff with Jazz Chisholm. You've got Frankie Lindor third behind Trey Turner and Dansby Swanson. His gap with Swanson isn't too big, so that could go either way. Obviously, Lindor's cooled off a bit past week or two. And in the outfield, I mean, to me, this is the craziest thing. You've got Marte, I believe he's 4th. He's in the top 6.
Yes.
Mark Canha is 7th. I mean, look, Canha's had a hell of a year, but he's 7th. That's pretty surprising to me. Brandon Nimmo, only 11th. Now, to me, I would think that Nimmo is arguably the most deserving all-star of the Mets outfielders. So, look, I mean, to have 3 guys in the top 11 is incredibly great, but Nimmo being the lowest one on the totem pole kind of shocks me because, look, obviously Marte's got the pop, but what Nimmo does OBP-wise every year for, I mean, the last 4 or 5 years, the guy's got a collective OBP of about 395. He's playing a Gold Glove caliber center field this year. Best defense
I've ever seen from Brandon Nimmo. You just keep
100%. 100%. And his bat's heated up, in terms of not just getting on base, but driving in runs, providing a little pop. He's had a good month of June. So for Brandon Nimmo, 11 is a little low, but love having Mark Canha in that 7 spot. Might have 2 Mets go to the runoff for the top 6 outfielders. So, vote, Met fans. You're allowed, I think, 5 votes every day. Make sure you're maxing those out because the Mets really, Tyler, if you had to off the cuff put, tell me how many Mets belong in the All-Star game. I'm saying 5 to 6, and that's no DeGrom, no Scherzer, obviously. Diaz should be a lock. I think McNeil with the 4th best average in the National League, he's hitting 327, should be a lock. Alonso, obviously, MLB leader in RBI. Lindor, top 5 in the MLB in RBI. That's 4 guys right there. You could argue for all 3 outfielders. I would say Nimmo and Marte. That's 6. And then, with his current hot streak, maybe even Taijuan Walker. Am I being a homer? Or do the Mets have 7 all-star caliber guys?
The Mets have more all-star caliber players than they know what to do with right now. That's how really locked and low they've been. And for me, especially when evaluating the all-star, I don't just look at the guys that should be an all-star, but especially starters, right? And that's where it gets a little bit trickier because as of now, the Mets don't have any guys that are voted in to even be a starter in this year's all-star game. And look, Goldschmidt is having truly a phenomenal year. So I can understand the arguments if, say, you believe that Goldie deserves to be starter over Alonso. But Jeff McNeil, man, Jazz Chisholm is a great young player. But if you look at all the numbers, Jeff McNeil has had elite defense, not just at second, but in left and right. I know that we're talking about second base, but he is one of the best contact hitters in baseball, up there with his average among the best right now. Complete bounce back years, over 20 hits more than Jazz Chisholm right now. And if you look at the WRC plus, the OPS plus, this guy has been pivotal. You can tell just in this Houston Astros series, the Mets lose him for a couple games and they look absolutely anemic in a lot of ways. So he really he's the glue to this team. And if there's one guy that I truly believe deserves to be a starter, it starts and ends with Jeff McNeil. So many Mets deserve to be in the All-Star game, but especially when viewing starters, I want to see at minimum Jeff. If him and Alonso would be great, along with Diaz and the Pen and some others. But vote these guys in more than anything. Yes, production's important, but it's up to the fan bases. It's up to you guys watching, listening, wherever you get your podcast right now to get these Mets in the All-Star game. This is a magical year for the Mets. They deserve to be appreciated, not underappreciated. Get them in.
I couldn't agree more. Hey, last question I want to pose to you, and this is all I've got on my end. I just rattled off 7 guys who, could potentially be all-stars for the Mets this year. Didn't even mention Mark Canha, who might be in that outfield runoff voting. So that's an 8th. What's your take? I want to know your stance on this push that Mets Twitter's had to get Luis Guillorme to the All-Star game. What do you think about Guillorme?
I am all for it. It's not even a joke. That's the thing. Because look, the biggest argument you can make for Guillorme is the playing time, right? But if you look at the season, he's played the majority of the season for the Mets. Maybe not every game in a series, but Buck has been so creative with his lineups that Guillorme's been a lock, especially with how great McNeil has played when he has been in the corner outfield. What has Luis Guillorme done this year? My man has been on absolute fire, 333 average, over 800 OPS, and is the best defensive fielder the Mets currently have. And that isn't even a hot take. It's not an argument. This man is a wizard regardless if he's at second, short, third. You could probably even throw him in the outfield, and I would expect great things from Luis Guillorme. So, yes, Buck said it best. It would be great if we had a utility-type role for someone like Luis Guillorme because he 1,000% deserves to be an all-star. Can't tell me otherwise. And again, if you're not a Mets fan, you might not know much about Luis Guillorme, but trust me when I say, look at all the numbers. This man has taken his game to new heights this year, has always had elite defense, but that bat has come around. And again, was one of those key factors even in the series loss to the Astros. Guillorme today, at the time of recording this, went 2 for 4, was one of the few bright spots for them offensively. And he's not just pulling the ball, he's hitting for opposite field like no tomorrow. Luis Guillorme, he deserves to be an all-star. I will do everything I possibly can to get that man in there. I know it won't be easy, but he surely does deserve it.
Yeah, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. The offensive stats don't jump off the sheet at you in terms of pop, just 1 homer, 7 RBI. But the Mets have played, 71 games, and he's played 49 of them. So that's, way over the halfway mark of games played. He's hitting 333, like you mentioned. His OBP is 410. And to me, it's like this is maybe the most impressive thing he does. He doesn't strike out. And I'm talking offensively because defensively, he's one of the best fielders in all of baseball. He just makes so many plays. Doesn't matter if he's at second, third, or short. He makes so many plays and he makes them look so damn easy. Really difficult plays that we take for granted because of the style that he makes them with. But the guy does not strike out. He's got 18 walks this year and 19 strikeouts, nearly a 1-to-1 ratio. I mean, he's putting the ball in play. He's giving the team a chance. He's going oppo, like you mentioned. Both hits today were a double and a single, both to left field. Guillorme, there's probably not going to be a spot for him on that team. You're talking 32 guys, and I'm trying to get 9 Mets on that team. but Guillorme has been as important to the Mets' success this year as anyone.
I would even go as far to say that Guillorme has truly been one of the biggest X factors for the Mets this year, knowing that they have dealt with ailments in their lineup and has given Buck Showalter the ability to rest guys. Let's not forget the Mets are the oldest team in baseball, folks. It's important to give Marte a day's rest. McNeil to either be in left field or give him some rest there. Canna on average has not been playing more than 2 of every 3 games. So all those reasons behind the fact that Guillorme, when he's in the lineup, he just hasn't stopped being consistent. So until proven otherwise, yeah, Luis Guillorme, sign me up. I love that man. And regardless, I really hope that Mets fans start to appreciate more what he has been to this club, because he is vital to their success throughout the remainder of the year.
Absolutely awesome. Before we wrap it up, the inaugural episode of Bleav in Queens, Tyler, where can everyone follow you on socials?
Oh, socials, you could just follow me on Twitter at WardyNYM. And of course, where many of you guys are listening right now on the YouTube channel at WardyNYM, we're gaining upwards of 16,000 subscribers in a year and a half's time. The largest Mets platform, not directly affiliated with the Mets or SNY for a reason, breaking down all things Mets. And that's what we'll be doing further here with you, Joe, on the Bleav podcast. I'm so pumped up for the future. So many great things are coming with exclusive interviews. Again, we're going to have a former Met as our co-host soon. There's a lot of great things to be a part of. So definitely hop on the wave. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts as well. Hit that subscribe, like button, wherever you're watching, listening. And thank you all so much for listening and chiming in to the first official episode of Bleav in Queens.
Yeah, don't forget, rate, review, subscribe, guys. Catch me on socials at Joe Serralo on Instagram, at the Joe Serralo on Twitter and TikTok. And thanks for tuning in to episode 1 of Bleav in Queens with Tyler Ward and myself. We'll see you next week.
Let's go, Mets, baby.